Hello and welcome back to the Review of Death, a Doctor Who podcast, your fortnightly home for Doctor Who news and reviews. I'm Matthew Toffolo. I'm joined by Billy Garrett-John.
And we are joined by the lovely Chris Chapman. How are you doing, sir? You all
Yeah,
right?
no, very well, thank you.
You've travelled very far, haven't you?
Yeah.
All the way from just south of the Bristol Harbour.
Yeah.
We basically walked the
about
same
5
route.
minutes.
Yeah.
I went on an electric scooter.
Did you?
And I scooted on an electric
You got on a
scooter.
Void?
Yeah, I love scootering, and I kind of find it very easy because I'm always late for things.
Yeah.
So I just go, I would walk, but I'll scooter instead.
I tell you what, the Voids are amazing. I love Voids in Bristol.
Well,
I
had to go on one and it was a disaster. So I had to hold on to you for dear life.
It was like something out of Titanic. It was
It
quite
was very romantic.
Can't do tandem, don't
I
tandem.
know.
You will
Now
die.
We're going to get arrested now. What have you done?
Oh, shit.
So yeah, what are we here to do today, Matt? Go on.
We are here, to interview Mr. Chapman about
We're just
all
going
of
to sit
his...
here and we'll have a chat.
We're just going to chat shit about Doctor Who, really.
Yeah.
News-wise, anything happened? Anything exciting happening in the world of Doctor Who?
We're due a box set soon, apparently.
Yes.
Yeah, apparently.
Next couple of days.
It was all a bit mad, wasn't it? The news for a few weeks. I know you. I watched your last episode, and I was thinking we've had all this new Doctor stuff. It feels like we've had a moment of calm.
I know.
In the last week or so.
When's it going to kick off again?
I think soon. I think that Russell. I don't know anything.
No.
Of course
At
not.
all. But I suspect Russell has found a new way of doing an anniversary story.
Right.
I think he's looked at the format that we've always had of let's get one thing and get them all in it. And he's gone, actually, I've got a different idea, a different way of doing this that won't just feel like I'm repeating Dare the Doctor or whatever. So I think, as you've said before, I think there were probably a lot of big surprises coming.
Yeah.
That again, I don't know anything about, but you can just feel it, can't you?
Yeah, it feels like it's going to be
But it
slightly
has
different
gone-
than before.
You're right, but it has gone eerily quiet, I think, in terms of the stuff
Yeah, but
that's...
that's the thing, isn't it? You've got to keep them wanting more.
I know.
Because everyone got so into the rhythm of, it's a Sunday, so here's check Instagram, what's Russell doing? And then Russell posted that very knowing picture of himself with the Doctor Who annual in the background, and everyone was like, oh, what does it mean?
First Doctor's coming back. I can't believe they haven't announced Rachel Talele's coming back, because it's kind of all but confirmed, isn't it?
Have they not? I thought
There's
it was
no press release, was there, to say that she was coming back?
Nothing apart from
right.
that she started talking about it, hasn't she?
And DWM retweeted her.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm kind of guessing it's...
I think that's lovely. I love that idea that he's kind of cherry picking. He's not just saying because it felt like he was getting his gang back together, and like everybody, Phil Collinson's back and all this kind of stuff. But to then see him go, ooh, I like that thing that Stephen did here, and I like what Rachel did. And,
Definitely.
And that feels really. It's the smartest way to do it, but often it wouldn't happen because people would have their people.
Yeah. Exactly.
But I think that's very exciting.
So what do we think? Multiple specials?
I'd like to think so. I think it seems that way. If they're recording that early, this is not going out November 23rd next year, surely.
Could it be a Christmas? We were talking about this before. Could be a Christmas special.
Yeah, and again, I don't know anything, but my guess would be like some kind of mini series of 3 or something, and that's his chance to kind of to get David back.
Yeah.
To cast Hugh Grant. I know Hugh Grant said he wasn't in it, and I'm like, Hugh Grant's going to be the Doctor at some point. And if you were pitching it to Hugh Grant would never do like a series.
Yeah.
But he might do 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
You know, he might do a one-off, and then maybe the third is somebody that we can't even fathom.
Yeah.
Maybe the third is Kate Winslet, or something. You know,
Something
who again they've approached before.
Yeah.
So I think it will be Russell thinking, who have I always wanted to get? Who would be an amazing Doctor? And then we go shooty, like we clear the palette.
Yes.
We don't bother Shooty with like the anniversary stuff,
Yeah.
which is so much weight of history.
Of course.
You want Shooty to be fresh, and clean of all this stuff, of all the fanish stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd love. I'd love it to feel like a real. I'd love it if there was a gap in the narrative. You know, that maybe Shooty, like Eccleston, there's this feeling of he may have been travelling for years
And appears out of nowhere.
Yeah. I don't think you'll see a regeneration into Shooty. Is my guess that you won't see somebody's face change into Shooty. I could be wrong, but I think there'll be a sense of a real jumping on point.
I've always felt that Jodie will walk into the sunset, but from the Shooty end of it, the only thing I've ever surmised is that Eccleston thing, that he'll just float into the world. And
I think it's probably going to be a conscious effort to try and let's not focus on the numbers. We've got so many Doctors now, and so many in-between Doctors that we don't really even know where they are.
Yeah.
So why not just go, oh, bugger it?
He's the
he is
Doctor.
he is the Doctor,
Yeah.
and that's all we need to know.
And you can see they did that in Doctor Who magazine, didn't they?
Yes.
That they didn't number anybody, and you're like,
well.
The game's afoot, isn't it, gentlemen? But yeah, and I'm all for it. I'm so excited to have Russell back, and I can't wait to see it. So I just that feeling as a fan of thinking, I trust these guys.
Yes.
For it to be great. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to get weird about it. I'm just looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Well, on that, let's jump into today's topic, which of course is Chris Chapman himself.
I should know about this, shouldn't I? This should be my specialist subject.
It should be.
If you're on Mastermind,
I don't know.
Hooray and DVD extraordinaire, right at the big finish, and a lot of other stuff in between.
Yeah.
How did you become a Doctor Who fan first and foremost? And did that in any way inform what you have gone on to sort of do and become?
Yeah. Where did it start? I imagine from a very early age, I've always loved science fiction and stories and fantasy and all these kind of this melting pot of all the series that we love. And I would have got glimpses of Doctor Who. I was born in 81, so I remember glimpses of Trial of a Time Lord. So my first memories are seeing the Doctor and Perry in the autumnal Ravelox forest. And then I'd mixed it together with Mind Warp. So I thought they went down the escalator and found bald Perry. And then,
Brian, bless him.
And then shot her in the face. I thought that was how it went. And it took me years to realise it wasn't. And I remember the Vervoids. And I remember that episode 2 cliffhanger when they find the lady in the... in
the room.
What's the name of the room? There's a number, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
Right. In her actual room.
And she kind of turns, and she's half vervoid. And,
that's lovely.
And I always loved anything to do with metamorphosis as a kid. Really scared me, so that got me. But it was really vividly. I remember bits of McCoy's first season, but it was watching Remembrance of the Daleks in '88. And I remember that just making me a fan and thinking I love Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And just that, particularly like Ace and baseball bats and stuff. And we went into school and we were acting it out. People say Doctor Who wasn't popular then. I mean, broadly it wasn't, but kids were still watching. Yeah. And so we would act out Doctor Who between the sheds at school, and somebody would be the Doctor, somebody would be the little girl that's in the fake Davros chair. And all that. And somebody would be Ace with a baseball bat. So that was it for me. And then I was just gutted it wasn't on telly then. I didn't collect any magazines. So when Survival ended, I didn't know, I guess nobody knew it was over, but I didn't know any information about it at all. And it took until about 93, when all the anniversary stuff started coming out, that I was probably at my most outsider at school. I think I was quite isolated. I would have been like 12, 13, and I was probably a little bit isolated and odd. And I really gravitated back towards Doctor Who at that point. And like a lot of people do, you kind of see the character of the Doctor and you go, he's like me, but also maybe we could hang out and that'd be nice. And started buying the VHSs and loved that. And then went from there to, I think I started subscribing. On the back of the videos, it would say, if you want to become a member of the Doctor Who fan club. So I got Celestial Toy Room for a year, and then from that went to Doctor Who magazine, bought like Downtime when it came out, and all built up to the McGann TV movie. And I kept everything. I had a scrapbook of all the cuttings that I could find and everything. And then was just so sad that it didn't, that nothing came off, because I thought it was great. I watched it and then rewatched it immediately on the night and thought particularly that Paul was amazing. And then it was just really sad. And slowly, over the course of a few years, went off to uni, drifted from fandom, because I didn't feel there was a lot for me to really get my teeth into. And it was really Russell bringing the show back in 2004 made me think, I really want to get back into this world, and started buying everything again.
And by this point, I gather you've chosen, I'm going to be a filmmaker. As like a career path.
Well, weirdly, I didn't want to be. I wanted to work for Empire. I was just a massive movie nerd, and I still am, and I love movies, and that's my big thing. And so I wanted to write about movies, and so everything was geared up for that. And I went and did work experience at my local paper when I was 14, and wrote film reviews, and was a film review of after the work experience for them. And then did my part of my BA and all of my MA was film theory. So I was just writing about film. I didn't pick up a camera or anything. And it was weirdly in 2005, a friend of mine said, "Have you seen this job advertised with ITV, with Granada up in Newcastle where I was studying?" And I thought, oh well, that sounds quite fun. And that was basically those old Channel 4 shows they used to do. Big 6-hour things.
Oh, right.
They did the 100 Greatest Family Films.
Oh, yeah.
Was the one. And that was my first job in telly. I was working as a door-to-door salesman, which is for 2 weeks, which is the worst job I ever had in my life.
Oh my God, what were you flogging?
I was trying to get old ladies to sign up to OneTel to change all their phones and internet stuff.
Right.
And it was just, I'll write about it at some point because it was the worst thing in the world. And I got the phone call on my worst day in that job to say, would you like to come and work in television? And it was this proper like clouds opening.
Meant to be.
Yeah. And then it went from there really. So that was 2005.
So from there, that's, I mean, saying that you wanted to be a reviewer and stuff for Empire, it's from 2005 onwards that you kind of learn your visual grammar and making documentaries and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I started I was a junior researcher, so I would have been 23. So I was a bit late to it, because I'd gone and done the MA and stuff. And I was a junior researcher, so I was the person who would research the films and then write the questions up for the interviews. And then I would often not be doing the interview, but I'd be sitting in the background, keeping everybody right.
Sure.
Making sure that... And then I'd be the runner. I'd be going and getting lunches and sorting out teas and stressing about parking and all that stuff. But it was the most fun job because I would be nerding out far more than anybody else because I'd get to go and meet Ray Harryhausen. Wow. We interviewed Ray and he brought this little coffin. Like, what's that, Ray? And he opened it up and it was this little... one of the Jason and the Argonaut skeletons.
Amazing.
Wow.
With the arms that you can move and all that. So and I got to like have lunch with Bert Kwok and everybody's like, it's Bert Kwok. And I was like, it's Bert Kwok. And he was like talking about Kato and he was like, I don't want to go home, I hate my wife. Is there any way I can stay with you guys for lunch? And like, yes, Bert, yes. And you know, I remember corresponding briefly with Lionel Jeffries, director of The Railway Children and Amazing Mr. Blunden, and who's always been an idol of mine, and you know, all these people. It was just really fun, and I was the one in the corner of the office saying, "I can't believe we get to do this. This is amazing," and really, but the weird thing was, it was the fact that 2 years into that job, they closed the office, and I was told, "Do you want to move to Leeds?" I couldn't move to Leeds for Newcastle, and they said, "Well, that's it then," and my ex at the time had all the way through that first job been saying, when are you going to get a proper job?
Oh,
when are you're not ambitious enough, which is mad. When are you going to go and get a proper job? And then she was convinced I should go. She got me to apply for Northern Rock before the financial crisis. Yeah. Because she wanted me to work in the call centre, because that was a proper job. Being a junior researcher in telly was just make-believe stuff.
Right. Red flags.
Red flags. And so I was going to have an interview at Northern Rock, and then literally also that the clouds parted, and I got offered a job at a place in Newcastle called Dean Films, which was a small indie that was mostly doing non-broadcast stuff. It was doing like commercials and corporate films and stuff, and I was just very lucky that I came in as an assistant producer. And I was only an assistant producer for about 2 months because I was shadowing the boss of the company, who was a director as well. And he started saying, "I'm so busy, Chris. Do you think you could do this interview for me? Or do you think you could direct today for me? Because I'm so busy." And then he'd be like, "Do you think you could just do that whole film for me and do this?" And I was like, "Yes, whatever. Yes, I'll do that." And was basically had 2 years. You know, I was there for about 5 years in total, and I was just fast tracked through a whole career.
Wow.
Playing with everything, and that's where I met people like kind of Neil Bushnell and Chris Chatterton at Curious, who we did the Ice Warriors animation there, and we started winning awards for things, and I started writing my own stuff, and I'd be directing but with a crew. I wouldn't be shooting physically myself, and then I suddenly realised, shit, we're making this stuff, and Doctor Who has these DVDs out, and they have special features, which when I could do that. So I started talking to Dan Hall and showed him a film we'd made about conker fighting, like a drama we'd shot about conker fighting, but it was like Fight Club. It was like conker fighting has been banned, and so the kids have set up a conker club in underground, and they're kicking the shit out of each other with conkers. And Dan really liked that, and so said, "Do you want to come and do Doctor Who documentaries?" Wow! And that was 2007.
From Little Acorns, eh?
Yeah.
Crikey.
Oh, like conkers.
I'm not just here to look pretty. I'm not even there for that. So that's the stuff. Dean Films is a D-E-N-E.
Yeah, confusingly, it's because it was named up because there's this whole thing of a dean is like a river thing, isn't it? It's something in a river,
Right.
It's like a geographical feature.
I should know this. I did do GCSE geography, but it's completely gone.
It's something, and so that it was named after the road that I think that the boss lived on when he started the company, which was Dean Road. And annoyingly, it was one of those company names that whenever you'd phone up people, you'd have to spell it because they would go like, "What?" And it just doesn't quite roll off the tongue, does it?
But it's one of those names you see at the end of a lot of DVD features.
I guess so. Yes. Yeah. We would have plonked it on.
And Pup is another one you see a lot of, obviously Moon Balloon and stuff like that. So we'll talk about the collections and the sort of stuff you've done recently, but I really want to talk about some of the DVD features that you worked on, and maybe how did commissions and stuff like that work for the DVDs versus the Blu-rays nowadays?
Yeah.
And what were your first sort of features for the DVDs?
It's probably not a million miles away. The boss at that point was Dan Hall, and Dan Hall's company, as it came to be, was called Pup.
Yeah.
So initially Pup didn't exist, but ultimately Dan would be Pup, and the BBC would give him a budget for a DVD release, and Pup would exec produce essentially everything that was on that set. Right. So it would be Dan who would then say to somebody like me, I'm doing the War Games. And Dan, and he might say, I've only got £5,000, or I've only got £7,000 or £10,000, and what can you do? And often that'd be the pitching process. That you would say, here's 3 ideas, all of which I think are doable for that cost. You've already got a making of going, and the early stuff we did was shit. Like the early stuff we did was terrible, because we didn't know anything. So I always think whenever anybody joins the range, I want to give them time to bed in, because we did like something about the real life history of the War Games, and that was rubbish. And then we did one about the links between the Manchurian Candidate and Deadly Assassin, which don't really exist. Which I realised halfway through making the doc. I was like, this isn't a documentary, is it? This isn't which is the nightmare. So it took us a while, and then I think by about the 4th or 5th one, we did the Creature from the Pit DVD, and we did a little 15-minute thing called Team Arato, which is about the special effects guys, which we really enjoyed making. I thought this is really fun, and the contributors are really fun. And I did an interview with Christopher Barry on that, where it looked nice, and the feedback came back that it looked nice. But the real breakthrough was Richard Marson. That Richard has been involved in Doctor Who for years, but is more well known for being past editor of Blue Peter, and he was going to make a 3-part documentary series called Who Peter for Dan, which is going to be about the links between Doctor Who and Blue Peter. So he's the perfect person to tell that story, and he'd had a whole load of awful things go on in real life, not his fault entirely, just awful things that meant he couldn't be involved in that release, but he'd stayed on as a consultant, and so they said to me, would you like to come and direct this, and Richard will be the consultant, and I think having that collaboration with Richard, Who Peter was one where we really thought actually the production values on this are really are much nicer, and we can be playful in a way that we haven't been before. And I was able to be far more creative about the structure. So I was saying, let's not do 3, let's do 2, because it feels like the first one is the classic series, and the second one is this kind of rags to riches story of surviving the wilderness, and then New Who and Blue Peter becoming best buds again, and that felt really nice, and I still keep that ethos of, that we could get someone like Gethin Jones to come and present that for no money at all, really for no money at all, bless him, and we're still doing that. We're still getting people like Frank Skinner to come and do it, just by being cheeky.
Fielding popping up for the Tales from Television Centre one. And I think we'll keep doing that, because it's amazing how if you're honest about things, and if you believe in the project you're doing, then you can get India Fisher to come and do her MasterChef voice in the Doctor Who cookbook or whatever, and people will do it if they think it's a nice project, even if you've got no money at all. Well, that's always the bugger, isn't it? It's always the bugger.
So you mentioned Richard. Yeah. So was this? Did you know Richard from our school, or did our school come through?
No, not at all. So Who Peter was the first time I'd ever met Richard, and then we worked together. We got on really well, and we worked together again on a documentary I pitched to CBBC called I Am Ethan, and Ethan was all about a young who would have been 10 at the time, a young deaf lad who loved music, and it was about a bit like in Strictly, it was like about feeling the vibrations of music, and that being deaf doesn't need to be in any way a barrier to enjoy music. And Ethan was a massive Doctor Who fan, and I met him because he at the time was Toby Haydock's stepson.
Right. Oh, okay.
So I literally met him, I think, when we were filming Looking for Peter on the DVDs, and he ran up to me and started signing. And I was like, oh, sorry, I don't know British Sign Language, but he just didn't care. He was just this bubbly, full of life kid, and he loved Doctor Who. He'd inherited a lot of that from Toby, I think, and so when we did the documentary, Richard executive produced that, and we had Doctor Who all over it, and it wasn't self-indulgent because he was a genuine Doctor Who fan, and that led to me. I wanted it to be a paper, almost like a Paper Mario animation thing, where you would have a paper Matt Smith and a paper TARDIS, paper Daleks, and they would be interacting with Ethan, and he would be talking to them and hanging out with them. And we went to Cardiff, and Edward Russell, who's a good friend, was really helpful and got me in front of Carol Skinner to talk about it. And they said, you can't have Matt, because this was like anniversary year. This was like 2012, 2013. Said, you can't have Matt, but we're happy for you to do this, so you can use the TARDIS. The nation, I'd spoken to the Terry Nation estate, and they'd said yes to the Daleks.
Super.
And I'd got Bob Baker to say yes for K9. So that's what we said, was that if we can't have Matt, we were going to have Matt narrating it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That wasn't going to happen. So we said, well, how about we do K9 narrating it? And because at least he's been in he's got some cachet with kids. And John Leeson said yes, and Bob Baker said yes. And so it's a really nice anniversary year mix-up of my documentary work, which is often with kids, and Doctor Who. But then after that, I started working with Richard Marson again on a show that he's been the father of, really, called Our School for CBBC, which is like a fly on the wall, moving up to year 7, kind of half a year in the life of high school kids. And weirdly, you've worked on that.
I have indeed.
And most of the Doctor Who people I know have worked on it at some point. Like Ed Stradling was a director in the first series. I've done it for like 8 years. And a lot of the crews that I work with on that, I'll pinch and take over to Doctor Who stuff. And so there's been a weird Doctor Who CBBC crossover going on behind the scenes. Even to the extent that on Big Finish, I've named like so many characters in Big Finish I've named after kids from our school or teachers from our school.
Yeah,
amazing.
Because when you try to think of a name, you're like, oh, I could make literally. So there's a kid who became like a grandfather in a robot suit who went to war and things like that. It would always be completely bizarre, like crossovers. But so there's a nice connection.
And so I guess before we move on to the Doctor Who stuff, what else have you kind of worked on recently? People might have seen.
So what do I do? I've worked on lots of different things. I kind of made a breakthrough into telly doing stuff for CBBC. So I did a documentary. I've got a stammer, and I grew up with a very bad stammer. And I pitched a documentary to the BBC called Stammer School, which is all about Michael Palin's speech therapy centre, which is aimed at kids, which is nominated for a Children's BAFTA and opened a few doors. So I did quite a lot of stuff for CBBC. I've worked then I did a big documentary for BBC One last year with Stephen Fry that was all about the history of mythical creatures. And I've worked with people like Paul O'Grady, and I've done a lot of work on Country Farm for the BBC, which I really enjoy, with Adam Henson on his farm, and just stuff.
Bits and bobs.
Lots of stuff. But I like to vary it and work for lots of different people, and have the Doctor Who documentaries always going on the side, and the Big Finish stuff always going on the side. So my wife would say I have like 3 or 4 jobs at any one time. So there's a lot of plate spinning, but it keeps me on my toes.
Love it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So talking of Big Finish, how did that come about?
Complete nepotism. Well, not so much nepotism, but just corruption, really. That was a situation where I'd met, we were doing the Death to the Daleks making of, which is quite a nice making of. We interviewed Arnold Yarrow for that in his house. And I said, let's have the Daleks narrate this. So let's get Nick Briggs and do it all in character. And so I think that was the first time I met Nick, because I knew he was a big Death to the Dark. Everybody knows he's a big He won't shut up about it.
It's his thing.
But I love him. And so we interviewed Nick as a fan, just to get that perspective. And he also did the voiceover. And I think I said at the time, I think we went for a drink and I said, would you be open to me pitching? And I think I might have sent him the Conquer film as well and said, look, here's something I'd co-written in that case. I'd love to pitch. And he just said, look, the door's open whenever you do. And actually, weirdly, it took me about 4 years of just being busy or not quite having the courage to actually do it. And it was when I left London to move to Bristol, I suddenly thought, I've got a month off work, I should come up with some ideas now. And I pitched them a story that I had a dream about, weirdly, which is all about a planet where if you are forgotten, you cease to exist. And so, because I was upset, because I'd lost my dad, and I was obsessed with, oh God, I can't remember his voice, or I can't remember what he looks like. Oh no, he's not going to exist anymore. And so I thought, I'll use Doctor Who as therapy to get through this. And it was going to be that they were going to have like a hall of memories where, in order to keep people alive, it's one person or one team's job to be hacked in and remember everybody, and it's their job to keep their planet alive by constantly having these images flashed in front of them. And I think I pitched it with the Fifth Doctor, Tegan and Nyssa, and as a 4-parter. And Big Finish came back to me and said, this is great. This is perfect, actually, because they were looking to do an anthology all about memory.
So that's where the memory bank comes. That's the memory bank.
And that's the memory bank, And so that literally was just incredibly good luck that they just happened to be setting up. That was Alan Barnes was doing that, and he said, "Can you do this as a 1-parter?" And I would have always loved to have done it as a bigger story. And when you listen to it, you can feel it's really compressed. Like, I'm trying to do 4 parts in 1 part. So there's a lot of, even more running than normal in Doctor Who. But I just thought, I need to say yes. You know, if I say no to this, then this ends here. And so that was it. And so I did a couple with Alan, where we did The Middle after that. It's all about old people, but you know, that sense that a planet where if you're old, that would suggest that you don't have a function anymore. So let's send them to war instead, and the young people can have a nice time. The middle people in the middle, myself included, do all the boring jobs, and the elderly are sent to war because they're expendable, essentially. But they have to be in big mech suits. To make it work. And things like Iron Bright and with Alan, and then it's just kept going. So I've done about 12 or 13 of them now, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got them all here. I mean, Warzone as well, which I think, I mean, anything with the 80s Cybermen in it is just amazing. We had a few questions actually about sort of separating the fan from the person who's there to do a job, whether that be writing or directing and so on. But getting to write, excellent. And knowing David Banks is going to say it, that must be on another level of excitement, though.
Well, I don't know if I did get to do that.
Did you not get to put excellent in there?
No, I don't think so, because I don't want to ruin the story. But the nice thing, I guess people know anyway.
It's a 2-parter, isn't it?
It's a 2-story thing. So Warzone is 2 parts.
Yeah.
And then the story afterwards.
Conversion
is 2 parts. And Conversion is far more David Banksy. And Warzone, the nice thing about it, spoilers! The nice thing about Warzone is that you're supposed to not know it's a Cyberman story until like 2/3 of the way through. And then it's like sneaky Cybermen, or like, you know, it's kind of under your skin, kind of, and that was quite fun to play with. And Warzone's all about, you know, it's me. What I do with Big Finish is basically take things from my own life and find a sci-fi.
So I gather you did a fun run. And it hurt.
Yeah. Well, because I was running marathons and stuff. I was thinking there's something, and I wanted to call it PB. I wanted to call it personal best, and then I think Scott Hancock said, "Don't call it that," because every review will be like, "This is not a personal best. This is a personal, you know,
this script is a war zone,
open goal." And but I thought there was a nice similarity between the idea of the fitness culture and self-improvement and what the Cybermen represent, and in a funny Doctor Who weird way. You could play with that and do something different with that. And the nice thing there is that Scott Hancock really wanted to lean into the emotional side of the Fifth Doctor and the unresolved stuff about Adric and so on. So there's a lot of that in that one, and that was really fun. And Peter, I think Peter's astounding in that one, actually, like really and that's partly Scott, I think, getting the right performance. But it is hard, the whole fan separation thing. I think you very quickly, like, I don't watch, it sounds awful, I don't watch a lot of Doctor Who for fun now.
No.
It's really bad. And I watch the new series, you know, when it's on, but I won't suddenly go, oh, I quite fancy watching Pyramids of Mars today. I still love it just as much, but partly because I've got a family and a crazy dog and a 3-year-old, and I don't have a lot of time, but partly because I think, well, I'm going to have to watch lots of it for work anyway, and I love my job, like I genuinely love my job, but I don't tend to watch it so much for fun. So I almost look forward to the point when I'm 80, you know, and I can, and then I'll watch them all the way through from the beginning or something.
Because you were talking about this the other day.
We find this as well, because now that we watch stuff to review the episodes, you know, spoilers, but I had to watch The Time Monster because it was your story. Oh boy.
I let him deal with that side of it all.
Yeah, you know, but we...
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. I'll give you the bill for my therapy, thank you. But yeah, it's that same thing, isn't it, of just that, you know, I don't really feel the need to watch it. I've seen it all so many times.
It's up here, isn't it?
Yeah,
We can rerun it, you
Mm.
know, all that stuff. I feel like we're living it through Twitter as well, which is the extra element.
True. Yeah.
Because so much of that community, which is lovely, but, you know, my Twitter feed is entirely Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a good fix, you know, it's going straight into the vein constantly.
Yeah. As it should do. I wanted to list out a couple of docs, just ones that sort of came to mind of yours. And if you give us a little bit on them, could be a sentence, could be whatever, best and worst, whatever it is. Time zones, so that was your first one for the war games. Well,
time zones, it's only like 10 minutes long, and you know, and people always get it confused with Warzones, which is understandably, which is the behind-the-scenes documentary that I think Steve Broster did for War Games, possibly Richard Mogsworth. I think Steve Broster. But Time Zones is like real life history. Yeah. Like, this is who the Romans were. This is what the American Civil War was. This was the First World War. And it's very sincere. And it begins amusingly with me trying to create a fanfare for starting our Doctor Who journey. And it has this incredibly elaborate CG shot of the camera whizzes down to find the TARDIS on no man's land, surrounded by barbed wire, which is probably, I haven't seen it for a while, it's probably dated quite badly. But it was genuinely me going, I'm so excited to be doing Doctor Who this thing. And then go, the American Civil War was... So weirdly, we were making a documentary that wasn't about Doctor Who. I was like, oh no! This was a phase that Dan Hall was very keen on this, that there should be lots of take-home from the Doctor, which I agree with, that you want people to learn new stuff. But he thought it should be... The doc should be about the wider human historical side of the story, or black pudding for vampires and this kind of thing. It was a funny phase that the range went through, which I think he then veered back from. But Time Zones is very much part of that. So I wouldn't recommend it. I mean,
it's not on our playlist of things to watch when we get home.
We were very excited to be making it. I remember doing the interviews, and we shot the interviews on green screen in a studio in Newcastle. And I really didn't understand what I was doing because I had 4 interviewees and a 10-hour day. And that's all we did because I did the whole interview, and then I was like, okay, now we should do the interview again, but we'll do it on a closer framing. So we've done it all like this, but now let's do it like that.
Wow.
And I was like,
run through the whole thing
and
again.
do the whole thing again, and this will allow me to cut between these two areas. And at the end of the day, I was like, why the fuck have I done that?
Why is everyone so miserable?
Why is everybody really bored and sad by the end of the day? And genuinely, it was just like naivety, and I was like, well, no, isn't that how you do it? And like, the cameraman's probably go, do you not want me just to vary like while you're asking the question, Chris? I'll just like go from one to the other. Well, we could have got a second camera if you wanted it, you know, whatever. But shit.
Naivety of
and that was like 2007, so I would have been like 25, 26.
And that's right at the start as well. Jumping ahead a little bit, looking for Peter.
Yeah.
That was the first looking for.
Right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we've done 3 of them now, but the third one's not out yet.
Yeah.
But the first one, that was the first time I'd worked with Toby Haydock. So I love Toby very much. And we've done 10 films, I think, together now. We've shot 10 films. And looking for Peter, I think that came from Toby. I think, you know, the idea of doing something about Peter R. Newman for the Sensorites. Just as this is a figure we know nothing at all about. And I would have come back and said, oh, I like the idea of doing something that's like a Who Do You Think You Are? episode that embraces the kind of researchy side of things. And that after Who, Peter, that was our next kind of breakthrough. That felt like, we can do something that is sensitive and emotional and smart. It's only 20 minutes long, but I think it won the Doctor Who Magazine Award that year, partly I think just because it was a different direction for the range. And Toby's so good in it. You know, Toby's really sensitive with it. And we found something. You know, we genuinely, it happened in very much kind of essentially as you see it in the film, that we didn't know if we were going to find anything. In fact, we did 2 filming days for that. It's all shot in 2 days. And after the first day, I think we'd found the family, but they weren't sure if they could take part. I think somebody was ill or something, right. And it looked like they might pull out entirely. Wow. So we were like, that would mean there's no documentaries, particularly when you've done a day already. So you spent half the cash, and so genuinely we were looking at that saying, you know, we might just have to pull the plug on this. So it was with all those films, there's a real sense they could go horribly wrong. Yeah. It was very the pulling the plug was it would have been a couple of weeks before the second day. Right. Because I'd put a big gap. I think because I hadn't figured out what the second part of it would be at that point. So it was really seat of your pants.
In my head, I'm picturing what happened when we did the Looking For, and it's all kind of one day after the other, and I'm picturing you in a Premier Inn restaurant going, oh my God, they're going to pull out tomorrow, it's going to be the end of it.
That does happen as well. Yeah. That does happen as well. So Billy and I have worked on a recent Looking For that we've done, because we did Looking For Lenny, about Lenny Mayne, which was lovely, and that was a real sensitive one. That was one where Lenny's death has been talked about publicly, but it's incredibly tragic, and I think his family are still, understandably, still grieving for him, and so that was a very tricky one, because I thought without the family you can't really do this, and if the family had said we don't want this to happen, we would have probably had to just say, okay, we won't do it then. We at least need your blessing, and we really need your involvement. And Sadie, his daughter, they were all very nervous, but they were lovely, and I went and met with them a load of times to bring them on board and to reassure them that we weren't twats. Yeah. And they believed us, and we're not twats. No, so we wanted to make a nice show. And one of the most scary moments of this whole thing was I'm very keen on showing the film to the main contributors at least, and so I went to Sadie's house and said, "Do you want to watch this? You probably don't want to watch it with me, so I'm going to go and sit. Shall I go and sit in the garden?" And I sat in the garden for the 40 minutes it was on, going, literally thinking, if she comes out and says, "I hate it,"
of course,
then what do I do? Because I have to listen to that. I can't just say, "Well, you signed a contract." I have to listen to that and do something about that, because it's just not right otherwise. And luckily she loved it, but that was terrifying. And the new one that we've done is literally I think gave my last 4 tweaks on the sound mix before I came here, and I really like it. And I think it might be my favourite of the 3, and it's a bit beefier. It's about an hour long, and that's with Toby, and also with Simon Guerrier has been consultant on this one, and I think that'll be something really special.
So get guessing, folks. Who might it be?
No, but don't guess correctly, or I get in trouble.
So you said you were talking then about like, you have that preemptive worry of like, is something going to go tits up? Yeah. What has been the biggest disaster, if you're allowed to say? What's been the biggest disaster on a shoot?
Mostly, we've managed to avert disaster.
It's totally wood, mate. Don't worry, you're fine.
I can tell you, I had a really stressful filming day recently, where it worked. It was really stressful, and it was a situation. This is on one they haven't announced yet, but we're doing the location film that we've done for season 22, where it's Colin and Nicola having basically a jaunt around all the big locations that you can still visit from that season. Yeah. We're doing one for a future set, which is in the edit at the moment, of the same series. And on that, we were filming. I'm trying to remove words so you can't guess it. But we were filming at a location. First of all, I wanted to film at location A, and location A were basically dicks and ignored us entirely, but kept ignoring us. And I actually went to there and ended up posting something in hand to try and get a response, and got no response. And then a week and a half before the shoot, I had to say, it's not going to happen, is it? They're just going to continue ignoring us, and that's crazy. Even though we threw a lot of money in their faces to say, please pay attention to us, and they didn't care.
That was like a maintenance fee, was it? For the like the offer for the fee was like a maintenance fee. Was it just
a location fee?
Oh, a location fee.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Because we were talking about a filming day at a private place,
right?
Which and normally there would be some kind of fee involved for that kind of thing. And in this case, they just ignored us. And a week and a half before, I thought I need a plan B. And just from out of my backside, really, I pulled just an idea, which actually turned out to be a good idea. But at the time, I was like, "Fuck, we need to do it." And so came up with a plan B, but then had almost no time to pull the plan B together. And the trickiest shoots we do are the ones with lots of locations. Like when you watch something like the writer's room or the doctor's table, they're bliss because it's one location. As long as you stay on the good side of that location, it's a lovely, sweet shoot. Yeah. The more locations there are, the more moving parts in any of these films, the more of a fucking nightmare they are to make. Because when they get that complicated, the weather, you can't have weather-dependent days. Yeah. If there's so many moving parts in a shoot, you can't have a backup. So you have to go all in and say, I'm just going to have to hope it doesn't rain, or if anything falls apart. And in this case, it was trying to bring together a whole day of filming with about, in the end, just under a week and a half to go. And it meant that when we went on the filming day, I'm kind of saying, everything's fine, call sheet, everything's fine. But actually, we got sign off from part of the location, but not all of the location.
Right.
Because the other person who needed to sign off just wasn't replying again.
Right.
But I thought, we have to go. And then when the crew started arriving at this location, the gate was locked. And couldn't enter the location, and our contact wasn't picking up the phone. So, and mercifully, one of the other people who was coming in had arrived at this gate, found it locked, and then managed to find another route into the location. Right. And we all then took that route. But I would never have guessed that there was another route in or known. So it was the kind of inventiveness of this person that allowed us to get in. And then everything was fine. Permissions were all in place. But it was really a moment where a locked gate would have meant that a third of the film collapsed.
Scuppered the whole thing.
Yeah, completely. And you just have to kind of go along. There was a funny one, an avoiding of a disaster on the new season 22 one we did with Colin and Nicola, where it was just me being stupid, basically, that I'd set up the shoot quite quickly. And we were going back to the locations from Attack of the Cybermen. Yeah. And I loved that it's very urban, isn't it? It's very recognisable, contemporary London. Matthew Robinson's doing all his EastEnders stuff. Yeah. And I wanted to shoot at that lovely long alleyway. The Doctor and Perry run down and the policemen come into frame. And I went on the recce. I was like, oh, yeah, it's that one there. And I got permission from the council to film in the back alley, and I letter dropped. I hand wrote partial, parts of letters and dropped them to every house that backed onto the alley. I found a lady who would lend us the key, and she opened it up specially. Oh, wow. And I turned up the night before the shoot, thinking I'll just have a second recce because I feel like I don't know this location as well as the other ones. And I looked at it and thought, that's the wrong fucking alley. Oh no, that's the wrong alley. That's not the right alley. And it was shorter. Yeah. They all looked alike in that area, but it was shorter than the one on telly. And I realised that the actual alley was over the road round to the left, which at that point backed onto a garage. And the garage had filled the alleyway with their cars. There were like 6 cars down the alleyway with a locked gate in it. And I kind of sprinted over, and the chap was locking up. I was literally locking up and going home for the weekend.
How do you start to explain what you're gonna, what's your opening gambit there?
I think it was money. I think I literally said, I will give you £100.
Yeah.
If we can come and film in your alleyway, it sounds wrong. If we can film in your alleyway tomorrow morning, but could you move all your cars, please? And he was like, I can't say yes. You'll have to speak to my boss. And
sure.
Okay. What's your boss's number? And I sat there with him and phoned the boss. And luckily, I think he thought it was all quite funny and liked the idea of it. Most these people never know there's any connection between where they work or where they live and Doctor Who.
Of course.
Because they're not nerds like us.
They don't worship these locations.
And mercifully, they said yes. And so Colin and Nicola arrive and they know nothing of this. But I have this alternate reality where I don't realise it's the wrong alleyway. And we'd still shoot the whole sequence. And Colin and Nicola would have just gone along with it in a game professional way. And then somebody would have watched it, like Toby would have watched it, or somebody, or Richard Bignell, and gone,
out come the pitchforks.
Chris, you do know. Well, I would have been told about it, and then we would have had to lose it, because we would have been lying. But we, so it's usually crisis aversion, and trying to get around these things. But nothing has ever gone, Touchwood, as yet completely tits up. There are things that don't get off the drawing board. Yeah. Things where you pitch it,
of course,
and then you go to the person you need in order to make it. Like we did that. I really like the weekend with films that we do with Toby.
Yeah.
And we've pitched some of those, and people just go, "It's not for me, love." And that's fair enough, because it's bringing the cameras into your home, so it feels very different to coming to a nice studio or whatever.
Definitely.
So there's stuff like that, but no complete disasters.
A couple of other highlights, I guess. Doctor Who cookbook.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
another
we're Blu-ray
RTS.
now. Blu-ray.
We're into Blu-ray realm at the moment. Yeah.
So I think the nice thing is, we finished the DVDs in what's that, like 2013 or so.
It was around that time, wasn't it?
Zygons was the last one, wasn't it? That was 2013.
It was towards the end.
Yeah.
I think technically the last one's Underwater Menace, isn't it?
Yeah.
But they took ages to bring it up.
That was like 2015, I think.
Yeah.
And I thought by the end, we'd got into what you can see when you watch those films is we'd kind of worked out a good way of making the budgets work, because the budgets are tight. Budgets have always been about 10% of what they would be for broadcast.
Yeah.
Right.
The Stephen Fry thing I did had a budget where our budgets are 1% of what the budget was on the Stephen Fry thing.
Wow.
So our budgets are teeny tiny.
Yeah.
But we want to make them feel like broadcast. And by the end of the DVD range, I'd figured out this good swizzle where if I said commission me for 3 films in one go, pool all the money, have 2 films be shot in one day. So we would hire a studio in London, and I would shoot like 12 interviews back to back in one day, and 12 kind of 40-minute chats, and I would be dead by the end of it. But we could get it all done. We'd use rear projection instead of green screen. So a lot of those ones have I guess it's like The Mandalorian or something. It's like a really low budget version of
The Devil Rides Out. I watched it before I came here. That's one of those.
So The Devil Rides Out is like that. Yeah, and so sometimes we'd use a green screen if we had to, and sometimes the rear projection will work better than others. Like the rear projection on the Great Show in the Galaxy is really poor because we had to shoot in a different studio, and the studio wasn't big enough, and you need space to do rear projection. But when it worked, so things like The Devil Rides Out, that's a really good example, because I think the Christopher Bowie interview is one of my favourites for that. And dirt cheap, because you're just doing it, everything's live. Yeah. And so we would shoot 2 of those studio documentaries in a day. And that would mean for the 3rd film in that budget, I could do something a bit madder. So we could then go and shoot for 2 days for that. So, and on location with a bigger crew. So that would mean one of those trios had Looking for Peter. One of them had Living with Levine. One of them had Haydock versus Havoc. And we could suddenly do these big, brash, entertaining kind of mad films. And the frustrating thing is, by the end of the DVD range, we kind of figured that out, and I think something like Levine and the Havoc docs are really kind of are quite fun and bold, and but then it ended, and I thought, well, that's it for Doctor Who, and then Russell Minton took over, like pitched the whole. I mean, Russell's basically the creator of the whole collection thing idea, and he was the guy who was pitching it and saying we should do this. And I was a bit reticent at first, because I kind of thought, have I done that? Yeah. I was doing a lot of broadcast telly at the time, and I thought, but then Russell convinced me, and I just thought, actually, to have that freedom of not having to work as part of a big telly structure, but being able to just make docs which are quite eccentric and odd, and standalone, and also then creating series and stuff. And so Cookbook was probably a kind of a peak of that, in the sense that I don't know how we pitched it actually, but it was very much saying season 23. That coincides with the Cookbook coming out, and thinking let's do a big kind of mashup of Masterchef, and most of our films are pastiches of something. Yeah. So there's a lot of Bake Off, there's a lot of Masterchef, to the extent that we were approaching India Fisher and saying, literally, could you do your Masterchef voice? Yeah. And she's got the nice connection to Colin and Big Finish, obviously. But we had to get special permission from the Masterchef studio.
I was going to say, is that like is her voice copyrighted for
Almost
Masterchef?
is, yeah, almost is. You know, she finds it bizarre and funny, I think.
Yeah.
Because she's like, it's my voice, you know. But if she's doing that tone and that approach, you know, so there must be a Doctor Who nerd in the Masterchef office.
Must be.
Or it just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And that was really fun. And that was, we always say, should we do a volume 2 or not? And I don't know if that would kill the joke or not, because there's enough in the book to do more. But it was really nice, and I love Toby. I love Toby when he's being like investigative and serious. But I love his lighter side as well, and he's so good at drawing the best out of the contribs in that. And it was really lovely. That was a really nice one.
You mentioned series, and before you sort of said how the looking fors were very much like a who do you think you are sort of thing, and obviously you mentioned Bake Off and so on there. There does seem to be a sense of you've got these formats sort of ready to go, you know, and it's like Doctor's Table, Writer's Room, they're kind of, to use a slightly wanky term, they're kind of evergreen formats. You know, you can kind of swap anyone into that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And so is that also part of that, of the kind of commissions now? Is it a case of, well, Chris, we know we'll have these on this set?
Yeah, it's.
Or are you pitching a lot more?
I'm trying to think. It's a mix really, and certainly when we start a series like that, it's not there's not necessarily a guarantee that you will make more of them.
Yeah,
it's not like the 3 writers' rooms that we've done were all commissioned at the same time. They weren't. Yeah, I think it was Russell would have asked about season 18, and I would have pitched a page of ideas of different things, and I would have looked at that and thought, what's unique about this season? One of the things that's unique is that the writers are all of a younger generation than a lot of the 70s writers, and that means they're alive, and we can do something with them. And I was always a bit remiss on the DVDs that I often wouldn't interview writers because I used to find it very difficult to fit a writer into the chronology of a story, which is mad because the writer is the originator of the story. But the problem is, I like to tell stories really chronologically and say this happened, then this happened, then this happened, with no foreknowledge of what's coming, that they don't know the ending when they're living through it. And so the writer stuff, the only way you could really illustrate that is with clips from the show to say, and this is what they're talking about. Yeah. And you need cutaways to make a documentary.
Of course.
And I would just think that was kind of preempting, because the filming hasn't happened yet. So how can I show clips of it? Which sounds really autistic, but it was a real problem. And so the writers' room was my way of redressing that. And think, actually, let's let the writers hold court. And particularly season 18 has that slight feeling of it wasn't a writer's room, but I think that Chris Bidmead really connected to his writers, and they were all interesting people. And I love that we could explore that, particularly in the season 26 one, that Andrew Cartmel, obviously, it feels even more like a writer's room. Yeah. I'd love to do one for season 25, and I'd love to do one for like the new stuff. I'd love to do a series 1-1. I said to Rob Sherman a couple of times, we should go back to the Chula, to the Indian restaurant they all went to in 2004, and have them do that. You know, and I enjoy that format where we would set up a shitload of cameras, and we just let them go. And I occasionally go, guys, can we come back over a bit? You know, if they've gone off into if Steve Gallagher's talking about bugs or something, I'll be like, I love bugs, but let's come back over. You know, and with the other ones, you know, Writer's Room wasn't cribbed off anybody in particular. Doctor's Table is very consciously a rip-off of a show called I'll Get This on BBC Two, which is a really good show, where basically random celebs all sit around a table and have fun.
Have a natter.
Yeah, and so the Doctor's Table is very much, we have 5 cameras running, 5 posh cameras all going at the same time, and I just write the questions, get everybody in the same room, and then I shut up, and I just get to stand back and will occasionally just say, I don't know if we made that clear, but mostly I'll shut up and just think, well, I'll make those cuts in the edit. I'll let them play, and they'll eat and drink for about 2 hours, and we'll make it 40. You know, people say, "Oh, I want to see the 2 hours." You don't want to see the 2 hours.
No.
You want to tighten it to 40 minutes and make it kind of Uber chat. Yeah. And then you've got this nugget of fun stuff that you can use. But I like having series. I like also having just kind of one-offs as well, and mixing it up. And the nice thing is, I think Russell Minton is is very good at saying, I'd like a bit more of this, or I'd like a bit more of that, and getting the balance on each set. So there's not too much. Like the Looking For series is a very, a hard, nerdy Doctor Who, kind of a deep divey kind of thing. And so you want something like Cookbook or Russell's work on Behind the Sofa. You want the lighter, fun stuff. And much more than the DVDs, the Blu-rays are about interaction, are about seeing how these people are with each other, not just talking heads in studios, but actually, and that's more fun for us.
Yeah.
It means you can have a more roaming camera that can do more interesting things.
Definitely.
So if you had endless budget,
what
would be your dream project?
The one that would be really expensive, comparatively, not expensive in tele terms, but expensive in our terms, that I was thinking about the other day, is I really want to do there's lots of biogs I'd love to do. Actually, a budget one would be, I'd love to do a proper life of Patrick Troughton, like a proper 90-minute.
Yeah.
I'd love to get his boys on board. I'd love to basically adapt Michael Troughton's book because it's beautiful and so honest, like blisteringly honest about his dad, but from love. Yeah. And the tricky thing with Pat is that I'd want to show like bits from The Omen and things like that, and that's really expensive. That could be like a quarter of our budget. It could immediately be spent on a 30-second clip from The Omen. So it's almost impossible. Yeah. So with an infinite budget, I do a proper like Pat's whole life and career with all the clips and all the cool stuff, and Jason and the Argonauts and Scars of Dracula and all that stuff. And but if we were talking about something ambitious in staging, I've always wanted to do a proper making of for the TV movie and to do it on location in Vancouver, go back to the park, and because it's a real house, isn't it? Kind of Grace's house,
and
is
they're
real.
all actually quite close to each other.
Have you been?
No, I had a look at a location map the other day. And like the centre where the New Year's celebration thing is happening is right across the road from the square.
This is what I like.
And then the alleyway. The alleyway is right around the corner. Yeah, so I'd
want to put the TARDIS back in that alleyway and have Sylvester come out of it. Oh yeah, and then Paul comes out after him. And then they go for so to be able to have the budget to take Paul there, Sylvester, Daphne, I love, and Yuji So and Eric,
of course,
and get Jeffrey Sachs involved and Segal, and I would love to do one, and I part of me is conscious that ultimately we'd love to make that film, but it'll probably have to take quite a few compromises in terms of quite how many people I can put in Vancouver. But I'd love to really do something juicy with that, and I think the TV movie deserves that.
Definitely.
It's kind of, so that would be really fun. And then there are other figures that I just think are unsung. People like Michael Craze, people like Ian Marter and Graham Williams and Mary Tam and people like this, and Adrian Hill we were talking about the other day. These people. And I think I've gone mad. I think that there's a few of them that fit into that bracket. Yeah, where you think that would be fun. I'd love to do a weekend with Annika. That would be good. That would be a weekend fun. With Annika would be good. A weekend with Wendy would be amazing. I think she lives on a farm or something. That'd be fun.
Oh, that'd be good.
In France, am I right?
That'd be good. So but every set's got its own. I've made a big list of the things that we'd love to do on each set, and but then I have to pitch them to Russell.
Of course.
And there was one I pitched. Should I tell you about this? I don't know. There was one I pitched on season 22, and I'm glad it worked out the way it did, actually, because I think the location doc that we've ended up doing, I'm really happy with, and I think it's a really lovely film. But I pitched something different that I think he thought might be I think he thought this is a can of worms. Right. And I think he's probably right. I think it was probably a bit too juicy. But I was saying, as a follow-up to the Revisited series, where we've done like Cookbook Revisited, we've done Who's Doctor Who and so on. And I think the Havoc film I kind of put into that bracket as well. I was saying, let's do one about Doctor in Distress.
Right.
And I wanted to get everybody back in the studio.
There's a lot to unpack there.
I wanted to get Hans Zimmer and have Toby talking to Hans Zimmer about doing it. And I wanted just to speak to those kind of 80s stars, all the random people, and say, what did you think was happening? And I think partly maybe it's a copyright thing, but also partly it was just a kind of, I would have made it with love, of course, and said, this is. I'm so glad this exists. I'm really glad that Doctor in Distress exists. But I think maybe there was a fear that could this go cross over.
There's a lot hanging off of it
into taking the mick in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, and being cruel about something. And I wouldn't want to be. I would never want to be cruel about something.
Of course.
So I'm very glad that things ended up the way that they did. I would love to have made both, but you can't always make everything. You can't always do it. But that would have been fun.
But I do like the idea there's an alternative reality out there where Hans Zimmer is on this thing saying, like, I was just playing the keyboards, I didn't know what was going on.
I really want Hans Zimmer to be. Didn't he Instagram a photo of him in the dressing gown collecting having his Oscar?
Yes,
yeah.
And
I was thinking maybe he could do our interview in his dress. Maybe that's just how Hans hangs out at home. And
maybe
Toby could take a jacuzzi bath, and they could be like, "So, Dr.
be a hell of an interview."
Yeah. No, and I think someone like Hans Zimmer, if you came at them the right way, and you said we're not being cruel, we're just interested, then you never know.
No,
you never know with these things.
And it's that weird sort of thing where he's probably like. He's probably almost forgotten that it's happened. And to have someone then approach him about
to forget.
it. Yeah.
I'm sure he doesn't care. Because he's a very successful, very rich and much loved man. But it just fascinates me. I love the idea that we're all capable of something, of a day that we would think, nobody would ever think that we'd made Doctor in Distress.
Sure.
But you did, Hans, you did,
You can't escape it.
Can't escape. Yeah. And Going for Gold he did as well, didn't he? The theme tune for Going for Gold.
Did he?
Yeah, that sounds him. Everybody's got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
We're going to ask some of your questions now, and Chris is going to answer them. These come from Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon. You can find the link to our Patreon down below. First one comes from Josh Snares, and they have asked, if the BBC called you to do another missing episode animation, which story would you choose? Because we kind of lightly touched on it, but obviously involvement in the Ice Warriors animation.
Yeah.
What did that involve?
Yeah. So, I was a co-producer on the Ice Warriors, and that was me working with Neil Bushnell. So I was making documentaries for Dan Hall for the DVD range, and Dan said, "Oh, don't you work with an animation company?" And we had an animation company in the same building as us, part of the same wider company called Curious. And I got on really well with their guys. Chris Chatterton and Neil Bushnell were the main chaps down there. And I think initially Dan had asked a couple of different companies, quite a few different companies, to pitch in animation. And I think he'd given us, this is on YouTube now, but he'd given us a 20-second clip from Evil of the Daleks and 20 seconds from the 10th Planet, and asked different companies to do them. So there's probably loads of these out there that people haven't seen of these two clips being animated. Cool. And they're on YouTube for Curious. And we pitched that. And we actually made a really nice kind of glossy brochure, which I've got at home, of kind of this is what our range would be like if we did the missing episodes. And we were trying to pitch like, oh, you could do like a regeneration box set where it's like the 10th Planet and Power of the Daleks in one, you know. And I don't think anybody got any work out of that. I don't think the Beeb gave it to anybody.
No.
And I don't think that was because everybody was crap or whatever. I just don't think it quite happened at that point. And then something must have changed because Planet 55 did Reign of Terror, and then Dan came to us and said, "Are you still interested in animating Missing Who?" Obviously, we said yes.
What a ridiculous question.
And it would be the Ice Warriors, and we were commissioned to do the Ice Warriors, followed by the Moonbase. And the idea was we would then do Underwater Menace.
Right.
The logic was you could only afford 2 episodes at that point, so you go for those stories. And we did it, Ice Warriors, and it was actually really lovely because I got to be, I was like the motivator and the Who fan, and I was the one saying, this is how we should do it. And I did all the initial storyboards. I'm not an illustrator. I'm not an animator. So then Chris Chatterton was the animation director, and Neil was there as co-producer to shepherd through the whole thing from the animation point of view. But I was the one saying, I think that we're very limited on budget, but I think this needs to feel like Doctor Who. That we need to look at the camera scripts and look at what they would have done at the time. This is not a story where we're animating the whole story. We need to fit into the rest of the story and feel as seamless as we can when you're going from real life to animation. And so that was my main thing really, was the detective work of trying to figure out, we can hear that noise. And you'd think, just go to the camera script. But the camera script often, you'd think, well, that's not what I'm hearing. So something has changed in rehearsal or in the studio. So that was really fun. But it just took fucking ages. It was just we had a really small team, and when you've got a really small team and a low budget, it had to get out of the way when proper work came in.
Right.
And it just took ages, and we had to just say, we can't do Moonbase, and Planet 55 then did a wonderful job on Moonbase, and we can't do Underwater Menace, and nobody got to do Underwater Menace. And we actually had to give money back. I think
Really?
we'd been given part of the money. We'd not spent it, but we had to give part of the Moonbase money back.
Oh, so you had already been commissioned to do
we'd been
Moonbase.
commissioned to do it, and it just wasn't viable. And actually, Curious had been having some problems anyway, and they folded, I think, a couple of years after that. It wasn't directly related, you know, Doctor Who was part of that picture, but it wasn't like that project sunk them. But we loved doing it. We had such a lovely time doing it. And I know some people come out and say it's like Captain Pugwash or whatever. Fuck you, Captain Pugwash people, fuck you! But I would always defend it and say I do think it feels like the episodes around it. And I think particularly when the animation is more about the faces and the emotion, I think the guys did a really lovely job on the performances of those faces. Where we fall down is as soon as anybody needs to move or walk or run or wave their arms or get hit over the head. It's a real shame that episode 2, the first missing one, begins with, I think, Jamie being knocked out. And we go, oh! And it's such a shame in a way that it begins like that, because I think that gives you a kind of a nasty feeling from the beginning.
But that's always the way, though. When you know, it's fine to look at, and then as soon as something moves, you think, oh, that's not quite right. You know, it's just one of those things.
What I liked about those clips, the Evil of the Daleks one and the 10th Planet one, is that they were quite stylised in terms of the character design, which I really liked, and I was sort of sad that we didn't get to see that, because obviously now they tried to, I mean, Planet 55 tried to be sort of hyper-realistic. I don't know if that, with a limited budget, doesn't necessarily work in its favour. Not always.
I think, I mean, I really like those original designs, and they were a bit more angular, and I think the lines were a bit thicker. I think it was more like, I mean, we were always talking about Archer as a good reference point for, you know, if you remove the big CG bits they do in Archer, then the actual core animation, it doesn't need to be the most expensive animation in the world to do its job, and we were doing a mini version of that. I think we probably just said, I think it would have been about matching the story. I think we were worried that if you've got that doing those angular, more caricature designs would work really well for maybe Evil of the Daleks, where most of it's gone. But I think we would have said, I think I probably said with Ice Warriors, let's just ease back on that a little, you know, in order to so we don't completely change the whole tone of it. But no, I like those as well. It would have been nice to see that.
I suppose there are two schools of thinking when it comes to the animation. It's like you either stick really stringently to let's make this like a 60s production, or let's go uber stylized. And I suppose now, where you're not having to jigsaw the episodes together with animations, you can kind of have more creative free reign. Like, well, we're doing the whole story, so why don't we just kind of, you know, change everything up a little bit, or make it a bit more stylized or whatever.
It's a tricky one, and I wouldn't change what we did on the Ice Warriors at all. I have really enjoyed the other ones that have been done. Macra's my favourite. I just think the animation is beautiful for, you know, considering we're still low budget. I think the fluidity on the faces and it is lovely in Macra. I would have kept stuff. I wouldn't have got rid of stuff. But I think as an animation, it's a lovely job. So that one I really like, and I like Sharda very much as well. I thought Sharda did a good job. And the plan and you know, the animation in Moonbase is not, I wouldn't do it hyper real. But I really liked, I thought they did a really solid job where they had that creative idea and they stuck to it. And the production values are really good. I like Fury from the Deep. People have been quite mean about Fury. I really enjoyed seeing Fury. I love that shot. I've said to Gary Russell, I love the shot when the Doctor gets hit by the dart, and there's just a painted shot when he's lying on the beach. Knocked out, and it's not animated at all. It's just a pure painting, and it's just really beautiful. And I love that.
It's fabulous.
So going back to Josh's question, what was the missing
what was his
story?
question?
Which one?
Which one would I have loved? Did we say infinite budget, or can I imagine
let's
infinite
say
budget?
infinite budget. Why not?
Okay. I mean, I think I think if you really had the money to do it, then there's this big gaping hole where the Daleks master plan should be, isn't there? And being that's not to say that everything in the Daleks master plan is. I'm sure we'd get to like that late middle period of it and go, when are we going back to the story? What's going on? But the first 5-6 parts of it are so much fun, and then it ends so well. And then you could have like a nice cricket match in between, and the monk's here, hooray, and all that. And I think the destruction of time at the end would be a really fun thing to bring to life and make that really. Give that proper kind of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusades, you know. Yeah. She chose poorly. You know, that would all be fun. Marco Polo would be great. Yeah. Because visually, if you were doing it in that way where you're not worried about what the camera script said and so on, then you could make that like Lawrence of Arabia, couldn't you? That'd be beautiful. I love Macra, so I'm slightly jealous that they got because I really like Macra. I really like the kind of. It's almost like a Saturday afternoon matinee version of 1984. It's like a kid's, like kind of baby's first 1984. All the stuff with the jingles. I love all that. Yeah. It's just so weird and quirky and fun. And I remember saying to Rob Ritchie, who animated on that, when he said they were doing it, I was like, oh, I can't wait to see. This is not lying. I can't wait to see the scene when they put them in the rough and tumble machine. Because that's like, if I was going to write what the Doctor's like, I would say, well. You know, he's the kind of guy where he's scruffy and you try and make him smart and then he'd get scruffy again. Yeah. That's exactly who the Doctor is. Yeah. And then he was like, I've got some bad news, mate. and I was so sad. I was so sad. But so Master Plan, I mean, something like, you know, those weird stories that we know nothing about. Things like the Massacre and the Myth Makers and the Savages. Things like that would be fun. Because you would feel like you were really uncovering something. Like Marco Polo, we know fairly well, don't we? Yes. It's all gone. But we've got enough bits of it that we feel like it's a friend of ours. But the Massacre...
it's just so unknown.
So alien, it's really strange. So I love the archaeology of doing a story like that you think, if we don't do this, the story will never be out there. It will never be really... engaged with by fandom.
All of them, I think, is the answer there from Chris.
Yeah, really. Well, that would be good. Yeah, that would be good. The Highlanders. The Smugglers.
Oh, the Smugglers.
I'd love to do I really want to do a Smugglers making of on location, because a lot of those places, there's some lovely cine film behind the scenes on that one. And the Highlanders you could do something with, but the Smugglers would be fun. And you've still got Annika, you could take Annika back.
True.
And if you did the Smugglers, you could do it in Captain Pugwash style, and it could be a real fuck you to people. Like, well, there you go.
Deep cut reference there for people to get.
So Andrew says, looking back at your earliest Who films from the DVD era, is there anything specific you would have done differently with the skills and knowledge you have now? Conversely, is there something from that era you're especially proud of?
So there's always, I mean, I try not to go back and rewatch them too much. There's always bits that you watch and you think, I wouldn't do that now. And there's a terrible bit in Looking for Peter when Toby leaves his house for the first time. You've had this really nice opening, but then he leaves his house and for some reason there's a library music track that's like, dun 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 as Toby's walking down. I'm going to go and uncover this. And I'm like, why the fuck have I picked that piece of music? Why? And I remember being in the edit thinking, I'm not sure about that piece of music, but maybe it's okay. And actually I should have immediately gone, that's shit. Why is that? And it completely sticks out like a sore thumb in the tone of the film. So I changed that. There are docs. I mean, mostly I get annoyed about like bad green screens and things like that. You know, I remember we did a shoot in a London studio early on where I'd never used it before, didn't have a chance to recce. Had a terrible. It turned out to be a really small studio where they painted everything green, so green that everybody had the reflections of the green. It kind of bled onto your face just from sitting in there. And the acoustics were really terrible. And unfortunately, when I shot it that day, I think we filmed with Katie Manning. And I think we did 3 interviews in one with her. Like we did this quite a bit with the regulars, where we'd say, you know, we'd acknowledge that someone like Katie, you know, there'll be some stories that she remembers vividly, and some where she's like, yeah, that was just a story. And so you'd do like an hour and do 20 minutes on 3 different stories. Yeah. And I really hated the fact that we had to keep using this shitty studio, because those 3 Katie bits would appear in films much later. Of course. When we were doing rear projection and it was looking lovely. Suddenly you go to Katie's interview and the acoustics would be shit and it would look awful. and you'd think, oh shit, you'd have this thing around your neck, and you wouldn't have the budget to go and refilm it. I wish we'd got more of the regulars. I think one of the big things that Russell's done is he's said, we're Doctor Who. So you need the Doctor and you need the companions, and there's no discussion about this, And to be fair, he'll benchmark budget and say, this money needs to be spent on getting Peter or Janet or whoever, and that's really good, because I think in the DVD range there was no pressure to do that. And there was an awareness that if you wanted to interview Tom, that would be more expensive, and you'd have to go and film perhaps at his home, so you can't do that as part of a big studio day in London. You're having to spend a lot more money. And so we'd often go, well, I don't know if Tom would remember that much about this one. So, so we had Tom on Sharda, because I thought this feels like would be a big memory for Tom. Yeah. And that was lovely. And I wish we'd done that more often. Like Sylvester isn't in The Greatest Show in the Galaxy doc. Just purely on a money thing, and also thinking, let's get people who haven't been interviewed before. Stephen Wyatt isn't on The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, which is why I really want to do a season 25 writers' room, so we can redress that. Because Stephen very rightly, I think, emailed me at the time and said, why am I not doing this? Yeah. And I didn't really have an answer other than we only have the money for five or six interviewees. So, if I had the money to, I would go back and I would just speak to more people, because that whole system I was describing of 2 films shot in a day means that most of those docs only have like 5 or 6 people in them. Of course. And now we're far more flexible, so I don't tend to shoot in the studio. And when we do something like Our Sarah Jane, there's I think it's 15, 16 interviewees in that, because it's me. I can now shoot. And I couldn't shoot then, but I can shoot now, and I can shoot well, and I can physically go to somebody's house and do that very inexpensively, and that means I suddenly can interview 15 people, where I could only really do 5 before. So more people and more like Doctor Who, more regulars is what I would add to the DVDs in particular.
Fair enough. Sarah is Sad asks, are there any Looking For documentaries you really want to do in the future? Looking for Peter is one of my favourite docs made for Doctor Who.
That's nice of Sarah. Yeah, loads.
Without giving anything away.
Well, there's a couple that we've always talked about. I think we always wanted to do something with Jackie Lane, and then obviously very sadly we lost Jackie, but I think there's an argument to say the Looking For format could work really nicely for Jackie, because she was always so elusive to fandom, and was probably having a very happy life. Doesn't owe us anything, but I'd love to do something that really got to know Jackie. We never quite got there. I know she's in the after party very briefly, but
I've got a special note to come back to that later on.
So that would be good. I know Toby really wants to do a Pat Gorman one. Wants to the many faces of. And I'm game for that. But I also don't want to do like a shitload of them. Yeah. I want that to be. There's been these nice gaps between the ones that we've done so far, and also because I want to work with Toby on different ones, like the Revisiteds or the Weekends and I'd love to do more of the weekend ones, but I think there were quite a few different people. I was thinking about Dursley McClendon as well for season 25. That's his name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who obviously has come more to the fore with the connection to It's a Sin and so on. Yeah. And the Dursley might be quite an interesting person to fit into that, or maybe that's more of a traditional biography. I'm not sure, but I definitely want to do more of them.
Fab.
Like the next one, Sarah. You can see the next one soon.
LTH Music asks, what do you think the biggest challenge will be when making the seasons 1 to 6 collection box sets?
I guess ultimately, probably 2 things. One is that they're really big, aren't they? So all of those seasons are, I can't remember, they're like 40 episodes. They're huge. And so they're big. And often because they're older, they're in a state of disrepair compared to some of the things. So for Peter Crocker, who does the bulk of the restoration, and for Mark Ayres on the audio, they're all huge. So that's a big thing. That's probably the biggest challenge. The other one is more practical, is the sense of, if it's a season with lots of gaps, then how do we do that? Yeah. I'm not really privy to that, in honesty. I'll probably be one of the last to know if there's like a new plan afoot with the animations. Yeah. I've done. I tend to stay quite close to it because I'll often volunteer to do the making of for an animated story because often it's a story. I find all the missing stories quite interesting, and I think you can still do a really good documentary even with scant resources. Like I was really happy with how the Galaxy 4 one turned out. When actually there's not a lot you'd think on paper. Are we even going to make a film about Galaxy 4? But I was happy that felt distinct, and we've done one that's coming up, which I think is a really good one as well. And so I think. And I don't really know the answer. Some people have said, how are they going to tackle it? I think they'll tackle it in different ways. I think the range will be in no rush to release a set that feels incomplete. I think that it makes perfect sense to go for the seasons that are more complete. But the lovely thing is now, because of all that work that's been done, seasons like season 5, partly because of returned episodes and Philip Morris and all that. Season 5 is suddenly like, that's pretty much a box set, isn't it? And so suddenly the gates open to us to say, and what's missing from it? What could we add to that? So that's really exciting. I guess it's like 3, like kind of 1 and 2 and 6 are fine. 5's fine. It's kind of 3 and 4. I guess 4 is better than it was, isn't it? Because you've got Evil and
with the animations.
But 3 is the one that's very thin on the ground.
3 is so I'm sure you won't. That won't be like the next set being announced. No, it would be crazy. It'd be crazy. And I honestly don't know quite what will happen to that. But I think the exciting thing for me is that with each of them, you're opening up these new avenues towards these cast members that you think suddenly, right, I can make a Michael Craze documentary, or I can do something about all those kind of invisible producers from the 60s. People like Innes Lloyd, who we hear about all the time, and it's like, what do I know about Innes Lloyd?
Or Anthony Coburn or something like that.
Loads of them. And I feel like there's rich pickings, and actually, weirdly, people go, oh, but isn't everybody dead? And you say, well, actually, in the 60s, the show. Certain parts of the show were really young. Were manned by people who were these kind of young kids breaking through. So quite a few, some of those directors and people involved in it are still with. It's healthier in some ways than the 70s. There were some 70s series, some Tom seasons that will be really tricky because everybody's gone. So the 60s ones, I'm like, oh, lovely. We can, Fraser's well and healthy. Wendy and Annika, all these people are still around. And I'd love to do like a doctor's table with the 3 of those guys and David Troughton or something, and kind of, there's lots of things we can do. So I can't wait for us to be able to access those seasons and play with them.
Patrick Sherwood asks, how long does it take for you to come up with an idea for a big finish to then it becoming a full script and then having made to audio? So for someone like yourself, you kind of dip in and out of that. So how would a commission generally work for you versus, like, I don't know, someone who seems more staff, like a Matt Fitton or an Eddie Robson or something?
Yeah. I mean, I for me, Big Finish is it's kind of a lovely tonic that I really I don't think I'd be necessarily good enough to do this anyway. I'd have no aspirations particularly to become a full-time writer. And I enjoy the fact that I can do a documentary and then write a script. And often the two are very beneficial to each other. Like if I've just been making a big observational thing like an hour school or something, then I've spent 6 months hoping and praying that somebody might say the thing that will make it work, or and trying to coax a story out of reality, which is often far messier than television. And then I can go and write a Big Finish script. And often it will be like in the evenings when I'm editing in the daytime or something. And I'm suddenly like, aha, I can make everybody say exactly what I want. I can be a complete fascist about this. And I can also take the ideas, the real life stuff I've encountered in documentary, and channel that into a Doctor Who version of it. And then as soon as I get to a point where I'm bored of sitting on my own writing a script, I can go back and make a documentary. So they feed each other really well. Typically, so for instance, I pitched a Big Finish the day before yesterday, where I'd worked with a particular producer on a previous one, and they'd enjoyed that one, and they, I think, tweeted, they DM'd me on Twitter to say, do you fancy writing for the next set? And I said, yes, please. And then I have a document of story ideas, like a bank of ideas that I've written down when I've been off work or whatever. And I'll often look back at that and just think, oh, is there anything there that isn't shit? That might work for this particular crew that this producer is looking after. And, oh, that one would work. That one might work. And I've had that new idea from last week. I'll put that one in as well. So in this case, I updated the document a bit, and I sent this producer 6 ideas, I think, all for that TARDIS crew. And some of them I'd already created them with that crew, at least with that doctor in mind. And some of them I'm like, oh, I had seen that for 5, but actually that would work for 6 or 7 or whoever it might be. And I sent those over, and they came back and said, this one, can you, because I would have just written like a paragraph or 2, like a proper blurb. And
do you write it as a synopsis, like a billing, or do you write it kind of a condensed version of the story, beginning, middle and end?
Bit of both. The easier thing to write is the billing, because then you don't have to know what your ending is. And you're like, and how will the Doctor get out of it?
Well, this sounds great, but I don't know what's going to happen at the end.
And often the feedback will be, can you tell me like what happens there? It can't just be the sizzle, And so in this case, they came back and said, like this one, can you expand on this? Which is fair enough, because you can't know every detail of every possible story that you would write. And so I then wrote a page and a bit on the episodes for that, and said literally episode 1, this is what happens in episode 1, and that can take a while. That kind of story treatment can, the episode breakdown, and it's good to spend time on that, because that will make writing it much easier if you've actually cracked the problem of A to B to C and why and what's going on and what's the theme. And I've sent that to them, and now I wait. And so they, in theory, they'll probably give me some notes. I'll fix that. They will send that off to be signed off by the BBC, whichever bit they send it to now, and then they'll let me write. And I guess traditionally, if I've got that story treatment and I think it works, then I'll probably spend on the first draft. If I'm going easy and I'm sitting in cafes and I'm having a nice time, then I might do an episode every 2 days. So a 4-parter would take me 8 days, I guess. And then I would maybe spend another week going back over the whole thing, and because normally that first draft's shit. And you just think this is all, I always say it's like a kind of rope bridge. You know that thing when often they're building a proper bridge, but they start by throwing ropes across the ravine or whatever it might be, and that's what the first draft is. It's just the ropes have been slung, and you kind of know where you're going to, but it's not great. You wouldn't send your kids out on it.
Sure,
it wouldn't be good for that. So then just rewriting and rewriting, and I guess that just depends, how lucky you get. How much you have actually thought it through, because that might be quite a quick one, or might take a lot longer. And then you send it to the boss, and they will give you either not many notes or maybe quite a few notes, and you just have to bounce it back and forward until you're done. But often what I'll do is I'll balance it with telly work. So what works quite well is if I'm doing a proper telly job, often I can't do anything else at that time. So like the Stephen Fry thing, or something I'm about to do for Channel 4. I can't do anything else at the time because it's just taking the piss to moonlight like that. But if, in theory, the Doctor Who should fit in between those jobs. And what's quite nice is if I do spend the morning doing production stuff and organising shoots and using that part of my brain, and often firing off emails that you won't get responses for a while, and then spend the afternoon writing scripts, and suddenly you're like, oh, this is much better. Nice. And then I'm not waiting on my inbox going, why haven't they replied? Why haven't they, I'm getting on with
busy yourself.
So that works nicely. So I guess a 4-parter is probably about 20 days work for me. But I think that, you people like John Dorney, who's genius. John will, as far as I know John does kind of acting jobs as well, and is writing in other ways. But John does so many scripts that I'm sure someone like John has got a better workflow than I has kind of cracked it. I'm kind of doing it as a tourist in a way. I'm enjoying doing it.
Enjoying your time.
Yeah. Cool. I'm not staying up to midnight doing it. I'm finding a nice cafe in Bristol. I'll often go to the Bristol, what's it called? The Boston Tea Party.
Oh yeah, Boston Tea
Party.
Has
a really nice upstairs space.
Yes.
And I'll get scrambled egg on toast, and I'll write a big finish, and I'll feel very happy. And I'll look out the window as people come past and stuff. It's nice.
Perfect.
So now you've just doxed yourself.
There you go.
Doctor Who fans know exactly where to
every
go.
Boston Tea Party in Bristol.
Jeremy Duncan asks the very serious question here.
I do.
Will the logo change halfway through the collection?
So I don't know.
And who do we ask?
I mean the person to ask is Russell. But I think, speaking as a fan, not as an insider or anything, I think it's unlikely.
Yeah.
Because history has shown two things. It was shown that when the DVD range had the same issue, it didn't suddenly become like the Eccleston taxi logo.
Sure.
At that point, it kept with the same logo. I think when they've started doing the collection, they know what it is. They know that it is a collection. It is something that needs to feel cohesive on a shelf, and that's what the buyers want. So I think that counts for something. I also think that the person in charge of Cardiff is Russell T Davies, and I don't think Russell's going to mess with. I don't think Russell would say everything has to have my logo, and I think he would also defend things like the collection, you know. And I know he does watch it. Yeah. We've had occasional bits of feedback, which is very nice. But I'd be amazed if it changed.
Yeah.
I mean, never say never, and I don't know anything. Yeah. But I'd be amazed if it changed.
There we go.
There's your cast iron guarantee there.
Yeah.
How did this, from Macro99, how did COVID affect filming for the Hoorays?
Yeah, lots. Yeah, lots. Yeah. I mean, obviously there were bigger things in the world than what happens to Doctor Who docs. And I've told this story before, so I won't give you too much. But it kind of hit us at a point, at almost the worst moment that it could, because normally we have, certainly I have, lots of docs going on for different seasons. And it just so happened that in March 2020, we'd come to the end, certainly I'd come to the end of a cycle where I was doing season 8, and that was the only one in front of me. And we were then going to figure out what the next lot of work would be. Because that happened, it meant that we didn't have something in our back pocket to be able to go, oh, well, we've already finished this one. Which if it had happened at different points, we would have done. We would have been a release or two ahead. Certainly on the docs, we would have been. And so it really hit us, because when we did the direct route for season 8, that was in early March, beginning of March 2020, and that was the point when, you know, you had people being locked in hotels in the Wirral, or you know, that awful thing with the cruise liner in was that in China or was that in Japan?
I can't remember. No.
All these awful, you know, but it felt very kind of on the peripheral and contained. And I remember on that shoot, Tim Coombe, the director, saying, I'm a bit worried about this COVID thing, Chris. And me almost being like, don't worry, Tim, it's fine.
But everybody was like that. People were taking a mick and making jokes in offices.
Oh, God, and we were in this very office laughing about it.
And I remember saying to the hotels at the time, I just would like to check your COVID policy. Are you cleaning door handles? What are your staff doing? Okay, but I was almost ticking a box by doing so. And that film happened and wasn't impacted at all by COVID. But then it was really busy. I was setting up for the Frank Skinner, Terence Dicks documentary that we did, and for Devil's Weekend, the film with Katie and John Levine in Aldbourne, and they were going to film consecutively. That was crazy. They were going to film like, Frank was going to be like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the weekend was going to be Saturday, Sunday. Okay. And it was all geared up. I'd spent weeks setting it up, and it was going to be great. And as I was driving to the hotel the day before the first day of Frank Skinner, Boris was on the radio doing the first press conference where they said, basically, this is happening. And I just had to phone everybody and say, let's knock it on the head. Because we were going to be filming with like Terence Dicks' widow, with Elsa, who's in her 80s. And at that point, we didn't know quite how serious this thing was. And we couldn't have risked any of the health of those people. So we just had to knock it on the head. And at that point, there was no guarantee that anything was going to happen. So Frank Skinner amazingly had said yes to do it. There was no guarantee that we were ever going to make that film at that point. And we'd flown over Terence Dicks' childhood friend, Richard, from Canada, in order for them to meet at Frank at Terence's old university stomping ground. And we had to send him back.
I was going to say, because on the finished doc, he's on Zoom.
He's on Zoom, because we literally, he was great about it. But and we paid for the flight, and he got to catch up with friends. But we had to arrange for him to go straight back. And then we couldn't afford to fly him over again. But we also couldn't safely in a COVID sense, because he was in his 80s. So we ended up using a Canadian. He's in Canada, I think, and we used a Canadian crew to go around to film him for the Zoom. So it wasn't just relying on Zoom being rubbish. In between. And so it really impacted that. But actually, in some ways, it became better, because that I think when we were setting that up, I spoke to Frank for the first time really late in the day, and I hadn't realised that he lived on the same street as Terence.
Right.
And I was like, no, Frank, are you joking? He was like, no, literally, I'm over the road from him. And I always wanted to go knock on his door. And I was like, shit. Because that's a great in, isn't it? That's a great thread. And,
but that never would have been mentioned initially.
So initially, because I'd already set up this whole intro where Frank was going to be in Cambridge at a park bench reading Doctor Who and the Auton Invasion or something. And then I was going to have Frank introduce the whole street connection just before he knocked on Elsa's door. Because that was just the way that I'd structured the filming, and we'd set it all up. And then I heard this from Frank. And actually, because it got cancelled, it meant I could go, actually, am I doing this the right way? Wouldn't it be nicer to frame the whole movie, the whole film, through Frank Street? Yeah. And so I think that makes it much stronger than it would have been. Devil's Weekend, we're doing social distancing where we can, so you can see that. I don't mind all that. Yeah. I think that's just an interesting time capsule for what we've lived through. Some people say, oh, it dates it. I don't care. I think it's interesting. I think in the future, that episode of Have I Got News For You, when everybody's on a TV screen, will be fucking fascinating to look back on. It will be amazing. And I'm glad it happened. But on that one, the only thing we lost on Devil's Weekend was that we were going to have the Headlington Quarrymen doing the most dances. Wow. And 4 or 5 of those guys from the original shoot are still alive and involved. Wow. So they were going to turn up on the village green and teach Katie and Jon to Morris dance with them. And that was the only thing we couldn't do, because they were just like, they were all really old. Yeah. And I was saying, can you jump on a minibus? And they were like, no. and very rightly. Yeah. It would have been a risk to them in a way that it wasn't to kind of meeting people who were kids at the time. So that was I missed the Morris dances. I think that would have been fun. But I was so relieved that we got those films made, because we basically downed tools for about 4 months. And just Russell and I said, let's just wait and see what happens. And then we got to a point where it felt like actually we can make this now. Yeah. But we didn't know that those films might never have happened. So I was relieved that they did.
Oh, excellent. Well, I think this question kind of follows on from that, really. Zach asks, what have been the greatest struggles of the Who-Ray collection so far?
So the season 8 was the hardest one to make.
Yeah.
Just the process of having to set up a shoot twice is demoralising and frustrating and exhausting. And I'm a one-man band in that sense. On the shoot, I've got a big team of people, and it's a collaboration. In the prep, it's just me. Yep. So I'm booking every hotel, I'm hiring every car, I'm doing the whole call sheet, I'm doing the risk assessment. It's a big job, and so that moment of thinking, I've done this already. I'm going to have to do this again. It was like you completed your favourite computer game, and then somebody wiped the file, and you thought, I'm going to have to do this again. Yeah. You might find some things to enjoy along the way, but you've already done this. Why am I doing this again? Yeah. So that was really hard. The shoot we did I was very happy with the doc we did for Fury from the Deep, The Cruel Sea. Yeah. That was one of the hardest things to do, like physically. The day when we took a ship out. To the what are they called? The sea forts, the Red Sand Sea Fort, just outside of Margate, was huge. It was a really logistically tricky day. It was a day where we'd already had to change the shoot day because the weather had turned, and that was really hard to kind of reposition everything to allow it to still go on. We had an amazing bit on that day when we were obviously filming with a drone, and we had our boat. And we flew the drone. A good friend of mine called amazingly called Toffer McGrillis is his name, and he flew the drone for that. And we had this problem that when you flew the drone close to the rig, the old rusty metal seemed to interfere with the drone signal. Wow. And this started happening, and the machine went and wanted to fly back home, wanted to fly back to where it had taken off from. But of course we were on a boat that had travelled 100 metres. So it flew back and then started descending towards the sea. And this isn't a remote... The rushes we spent the whole day shooting are on a card on that drone.
Yeah.
So when that goes in the water, we've
Everything's
lost
gone.
everything. And we hurriedly had to turn the boat around and get underneath it. And Toffer's there with his remote control, literally going, shit, shit, shit. And I had to jump up on the top of the boat and catch it out of midair to keep it safe. Wow. So that was a fairly stressful day.
Sounds like it.
And because the weather and various things, when we actually got onto the rig, I had like about 15 minutes to shoot everything that you see on the rig. And that was really hard. Because there's a sense with that, because I was cross-shooting myself and a chap called Jeremy Bishop, who I use a lot, who is a good friend. And I kind of said to Jeremy, look, this is a bit dangerous, so I'd rather you stay down and I'll go up and shoot this. Let's keep this simple and not have two shooters running around. And having to shoot that all in 15 minutes
on your own,
on my own,
wow.
and to be really disciplined with it, because sometimes I go a bit mad. Like if it's a short amount of time, if I know we're behind, you can lose your mind.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can just become ragged, and you're just shooting, but you're not thinking. And on that one, mercifully, I managed to keep it together, but that was really hard. I think at the end of that day, we were all ready for bed. We were very tired on that.
And then we've got one from Retro Menace, which says, will we get a Wilderness Years collection set in the future? And what kind of approach would a set like that require? I mean, you've already mentioned TV movie being something you'd like to do.
Yeah. So, I'm not going to say anything official about this.
Yes.
But I would look, if I was a fan, which I am, I would look at the sets and think, well, where's Who Peter Part 2? Where's Search Out Science? Where are they going to go? And people might draw their own conclusions as to where they're going to go. Yeah. But they're going to go somewhere. And so I think a Wilderness Years is a great idea for a set. And I think people are like, oh, what are you going to put on it? I think there's shitloads of stuff. And obviously the TV movie is a centerpiece of if you were going to do that. So I think I think there's loads of stuff to be done. And if you could get the rights to it, then I don't know the answer to this, but having Dimensions in Time, you might be able to, maybe you could do like a Dimensions in Time revisited. That would work quite well with that strand. But I would most love to do it. I'd be most excited about the TV movie making of thing. Yeah. That would be the big thing. But I think you could do a real proper warts and all thing on like Big Finish, and on all the literature, all the kind of new and missing adventures and stuff. I know that's been touched on in the Doctor Forever stuff, but I think you could do something.
There's still a lot to tap. I think, like
a biggie
stuff like More Than 30 Years, and even just the making of that, because that was such a great kind of
it's fantastic
piece.
Well, no, and you could do with that. I know that Kevin's got a lot of stories. Yeah. Kevin Davis, the director's got a lot of stories to tell about that. But the genuine truth is, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I won't know until Russell says it's been greenlit. Yeah. And it's genuinely our intention to do the lot. But until something is greenlit, we don't know if it's going to happen or not. Theoretically, because if everybody suddenly went, I'm not buying season 22. that sounds rubbish. And nobody bought it. Then there's no guarantee until we're commissioned. But certainly, we like to make things about Doctor Who. Yeah. And that's Doctor Who.
I like it.
And then the final question, which is not a Doctor Who question, you'll be pleased to hear, is...
or sad, possibly.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Chris Clark asks, what is your favourite incarnation of Megatron and why? And also, your favourite Transformer in the collection. I was actually going to say to you, who's your favourite Transformer?
So this is, I don't know how many people know, my kind of geeky sideline, really. My first love is Doctor Who. Yeah. But I'm a big Transformers fan. I'm quite a specific Transformers fan. I'm very much, some people will hate this, but I'm very much a kind of G1. Yeah. I'm driven by the nostalgia of my childhood, but really the stuff I really love is the run on Marvel Comics, specifically like the UK Simon Furman run. I think is amazing, and I've got them all up on my shelf, and it was a really important thing to me at that age. It was because they were fucking incredibly violent and really and nasty and grown up and smart. And I think Simon, I've never met Simon, but I would hug him if I met him, because I think he's a real smart guy. And I love the way that weaves in and out of the US comic that Bob Budiansky was writing at the same time. So I love all that. Megatron. I mean, I'd go original Megatron. And I'm a complete sucker for the cartoon and the movie in particular. I'd go movie Megatron. Yeah. That original movie. Not. I mean, I'm a complete cliche because I can't stand the Michael Bay movies, and I would never have that Megatron. No, and I don't know what he's supposed to look like. He's just like a fucking mess. Apologies to Inflatable Dalek if you're watching this. I know you're a fan. But I would really say Marvel Megatron.
Right.
I would really say, actually, although I love Furman, there's a lovely run at the beginning of the US comic that Buddy Ensky writes when everybody's been deactivated by Shockwave,
right.
and Megatron and Ratchet join forces.
Okay, yeah.
And then kind of turn on each other.
Right.
And the Megatron of that kind of era, when he's been taken down a peg, is really interesting. There's a really scary one that Furman wrote at the end of the UK run when Megatron and Ratchet get fused together as part of an interdimensional warp accident.
Right.
And they're literally like half and half. And it used to give me incredible nightmares. It's really scary. So that one's quite fun too. And favourite Transformer in general?
Yeah, favourite Transformer in general. Who's your... But Autobot and Decepticon.
It was as a kid. I mean, I really like the Dinobots. I know that's a cliche again, but and Simon Furman loved writing for them. I loved the stuff they did with Galvatron in the UK comics,
right?
Because Galvatron was basically this time travelling nutcase,
right?
Who was just really powerful. And there's one when Megatron and Galvatron team up,
like
present day and modern future versions of themselves. And it's called like it's called Time Wars, but part of it's called Twins of Evil. There's a cover that says Twins of Evil with the two of them with guns, and that was the first one I ever bought when I was a kid. So I think comic Galvatron, and for the Autobots, I think I love the movie so much that I maybe Optimus Prime purely for that stuff in the movie, for the '86 movie is, and I've got a whole shelf of them at home, and I love them. And I used to really like Blaster. Yeah. And I've got an Omega Supreme at home, who's really big. Billy, he's so big.
Billy's
so big.
Yeah,
he's so big. And Omega Supreme does this amazing thing that he's basically like a little mini train track and a rocket. And amazingly, the rocket takes off and arrives at Cybertron, and somehow the train track is there. It's somehow there, and we don't know how.
What a nerd, honestly.
But my dream would be, I'd love to do something about, I make documentaries about Doctor Who, but I've never been able to do something about Transformers.
That'd be cool.
And I would love that. There's some really good YouTube-y stuff. Like there's a chap called Chris McFeely who does something called The Basics, which I'd recommend to anybody because it takes each character or each theme or subject of Transformers and breaks it down into like a 10-minute video of everything.
I might give that a go. If it explains the bare basics from the beginning.
It does.
There's masses of lore for Transformers.
I thought it was just cars turning into robots and beating the shit out of each other.
See, this was what frustrated me about the live-action movies.
Well,
because I think the live-action movies fail. The joy I have with Transformers is these inanimate objects that actually have full personalities and lore and a civilization and religion and everything behind them. And the other thing I'd recommend for you, Billy, is a very clever chap called James Roberts. Has written a big comic called More Than Meets the Eye that became Lost Light. And that's a kind of modern take on Transformers where there's this thing called functionalism, where Transformers becomes a metaphor for the class system, whereby if you're born into your body, if you're a digger or something, you're basically working class. If you're a jet, then you're like a Flash boy.
If you're a Rolls Royce aristocracy.
And everybody's like, what are you supposed to be? You're a rubbish alternate mode. And and he's built the whole thing on that. So James Roberts I think James Roberts would be amazing writing for Doctor Who. And I know he's a big Red Dwarf fan. I think he's a pretty big Doctor Who fan.
Sounds all right in my books. He's a Red Dwarf fan.
So that's your Transformers injection at the end there.
Sorry, over the way.
To segue into the next bit, I should edit in the
smiley face, sad face.
Just Billy's confused face.
Is that where that comes from? I thought it was Batman, the whirly thing with the face.
Well, Batman does it, but then Transformers
does it better.
Okay, all right.
I think all the cartoons in the 80s had it. He-Man had it as well with the sword.
Definitely, it was always a good transitional point, wasn't it? We use them on our school as well.
Right.
But without the smiley face, sad face.
Gutted.
We should do it with Doctor Who where it's like a sad Tom becomes like a happy Tom or something.
I'm sure there's lots of photos of both you could find out there.
Sure.
Perfect headshots from the title sequences.
We've got to transition from that into something equally depressing to talk about, which is, of course, the Time Warrior.
Yeah, I mean, it's not...
No! It's not! It's not the Time Warrior.
Time Monster! Oh, I see, look, I don't even care about this story.
Wow, my God.
I'm checked out. I'm checked out.
So what's happened here is, because Billy's checked out, is these guys that you asked me to come up with a guilty pleasure.
A guilty pleasure,
But you sent me like the rankings from Doctor Who magazine.
Yeah.
And the bottom 20 or so.
Because that's always been the main sort of conceit of what we're doing, and so a couple of them we've spoken about. I think Silver Nemesis may have come up on the list as well.
Yeah, I like Silver Nemesis.
I like,
we like Silver Nemesis.
A couple of bits and bobs.
I think Underworld might have been on there. Or Delta and the Bannerman was on there, for sure.
I would defend Delta as well.
Yeah, I love Delta.
Delta's good.
But you chose The Time Monster.
The Time Monster.
Yeah!
So you didn't watch The Time Monster.
I didn't watch The Time Monster in preparation, no.
I did, and I will tell you all now, if you are ever struggling with insomnia, put The Time Monster on, because I've tried to fall asleep so many times watching that. It's fun. And I think that's all I can say.
There we go. Now this is your stage here, Chris.
Get on your soapbox and
Well, I picked the Time Monster from that list because weirdly, it's I think it's the last Pertwee I ever saw.
Right.
I think it's one of those ones because it was very late coming out on VHS in the range, and so I probably didn't watch it until about 2004 or so, like really late on. And so it was kind of this thing I was holding back and got to enjoy very late, and the Pertwees are always the era that I find most comfortable. And something like Terror of the Autons is this lovely duvet of the unit family, and the Time Monster's always been significant because it's the last time that family are kind of all really together. Now, obviously, I know you've got things like Planet of the Spiders and stuff when they're kind of together, but obviously, this is the penultimate story that Roger Delgado does.
Yes, yeah.
And it's very self-consciously, even down to who's directing it. You know, well, not directing, but the fact that Barry Letts is collaborating with Robert Sloman, and it's the season finale following the season finale that they've done with the Demons. Yeah. And so they probably think they're making something that's like, let's go out on a high again like that. But it has this thing that I love about it, that it feels like a proper end of the pier, panto season, all your favourites are here. Yeah. There's something that's so comfortable about it that I love it. Now, Katie Manning, I've spoken to her about The Time Monster. Yeah. Katie doesn't remember anything of all of the stories that Katie did. She's like, I don't remember. I have no memory of it whatsoever. Wow. So I don't know if it was that end of year, they're just so knackered that they just did it and it happened. But it's kind of this invisible Pertwee that nobody really talks about. Yeah. And we always used to see pictures of Kronos and Ingrid Pitt in the books and stuff. Yeah. And when I watched it, I just thought this is so lovable and silly, and all the kind of come Kronos, come, and it's got this kind of vibe of a 70s Hammer, but with a panto kind of carry on element to it.
Yeah, very carry on.
Which I really like. Yeah. And I went through a phase after I first saw it that I would just I would have it on in the background all the time. I'd come home from the pub and be like, what shall I put on? All the Time Monster. And I just found it so comforting. And I don't care that it's not very good. I'm not saying it's a great underrated Doctor Who story. Yeah. I think it's crap. Yeah. But I think it's so lovely and warm and cuddly, and it allows itself for stupid things like kind of Baby Benton. Yes. Yeah. And all that. And I love that. And I just really enjoy it, and I want to give it a big hug whenever it's on. Yeah. I do.
All I remember from it is Ingrid Pitt and the bizarre device,
two things, isn't it?
The rather phallic and the rather phallic-looking device.
Oh, it's very phallic.
Oh yeah.
Which somebody must have been having a laugh in the props
I was
department.
Suggesting to Lee Binding that when he comes to do the design for that cover, that should be the thing that Jon Pertwee should be having the penis locator.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I watched this with Jonathan. He was like, I'll watch it with you, because he likes The Time Monster as well. Yeah. And my girlfriend likes it. She was like, no, this is a good story. I was like, okay. So we sat down and watched it, and I was like, oh, here comes the penis locator. And he was like, what? I was like, this thing looks like a dick. And he was like,
cock and balls.
Yeah. And then he saw it, and he was like, oh my God, I've never noticed that before. So then when the doctor's like, oh, what's the reading, Joe? And she's like, oh, and I was like, yes, check the right testicle. The left testicle saying this.
If only the ball's like rotated or something, that would be, because it has got a spinny thing.
It's got a spinny thing on the top.
On the tip, yeah.
I just love it, and I'm sure that they designed that. They must have done.
Yeah.
People had cocks and balls in the 70s.
Yeah, apparently. So. But I think that does feed into the kind of end of term kind of very. It's almost Doctor Who kind of setting itself up in a way.
It is. It's like the final school play of term, isn't it?
It's so strange, and I think they obviously know that it's too silly because season 10's got so many great stories, and the Green Death is an end of season like but it has much more of a backbone and it's got a much better script than Time Monster does, and it's much better. It's got much better direction from Michael Brown, but I just think. I want to watch it now. Should we just watch it now?
Why not? Why not?
You guys should watch it now.
I haven't had a good sleep in a while, so I'd be very happy to sit down with it and give it a watch.
Weirdly, I remember I'm less fond of the Atlantis stuff. I think some people say they really like the Atlantis stuff, but the Minotaur stuff is all a bit...
That's all a bit crap.
A bit crap.
Yeah.
But it's the stuff at the beginning with the college thing.
Yes.
And the master pretending to be a professor.
Yeah.
And his students, the two students are just a bit weird, aren't they?
Yeah.
All the kind of stew pot stuff. It's just all a bit weird, and I like that. I really like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it does take a very weird turn. Like watching it, I was like, so episode 4 is almost predominantly set in the TARDISes.
Yeah.
And it's like nothing is really happening to progress the plot at all. It's just all this weird stuff about, I've bashed my tailbone, you're coccyx. It's like, right, okay, hilarious, get on with it. And then it's then Jon Pertwee like talking about some bloody Venusian, this, that, and the other. I'm like, just get on with the story, come on. And then we get to Atlantis, and then it's all very... It feels very stilted and very wooden. I think you've got the king who's excellent, but then you've got like his son who doesn't quite commit to it in the same way. And
you need to commit to these things.
Yeah, and I think he's just aware, like, oh Christ, I've got a little skirt on and I've got a bloody daft wig on my head.
What the fuck is that? I went to RADA. Now, what am I doing here? I think it's probably the first 3 episodes. Are the things that I go back to.
Yeah.
There's just something about it, and it's Paul Bernard, isn't it? Is the director on that one? I think. I do love it. And I watched those first 3 episodes in particular over and over.
And I think the other thing that I noticed with those first 3 episodes, is it the first time like Doctor Who really plays around with the manipulation of time outside of travelling in time? Because we have all that stuff where things are being slowed down, people are getting frozen, the bomb is dropped, which is taken from the 40s and all that sort of stuff. Can't really think of another story.
No, you're right. I'm just cycling through the history of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
We do that all the time.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of was the start of the Space Museum, where Vicky drops the glass.
She drops the glass. Yeah. You're right. It's tended not to. It's been more like a Red Dwarfy kind of thing over the years, hasn't it? Than a Doctor Who thing. No, that probably is to that extent. Although haven't we had? I feel like we've had cavemen, not cavemen, but people from the past who found themselves, I guess, actually Invasion of the Dinosaurs is afterwards, isn't it? So that idea of transporting creatures through time.
And that's Robert Soman as well, isn't it?
No, that's Mac Hulk.
Oh, it's Mac Hulk, yeah.
But I can't think of one before. There must be. I mean, I guess you've got, whenever else it's done, it's more like time travel within a story, like kind of Evil of the Daleks style stuff, but it's not the same. So you're right, that's a reason, it's a pioneering.
There we go.
A pioneering time monster.
We've found our answer.
The one good thing about it, there we go. Rather than poor Kronos, poor bloke with a bucket on his head, flapping his arms. Oh dear.
It's when they're swinging him back and forth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're like, he's not got a lot of room to swing.
Crikey. Well, there we go. That's the Defence of the Time Monster. Chris, thank you very much for coming along. Is there anything you want to plug or let people know about, or
only that I think by the time you see this, season 22 will be either with people or imminent. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope everybody enjoys it. We always have fun making it, and I think with all the sets, it's a whole group of people, like a real ensemble of people who love it, who love doing it. So I hope that comes across. I hope people can see that love.
Definitely. Look out for my pink beanie on location.
Yeah. Well, can it sign my copy?
It can. I should have brought it.
You should have done, shouldn't you? Yeah.
It was a very handy beanie, wasn't it?
It was a very handy beanie. Nicola was very happy.
When we filmed at Ironbridge, Nicola, it was quite a very cold day, was it? A chilly
I think
day.
it was colder than we thought it was going to be. She
Yeah.
definitely wanted a Woolies.
Yeah. No, and fortunately you had a lovely pink beanie with you that that would have looked delectable on you and looked even better on
Well, it did.
How gallant of you to...
I know, isn't it? It's not like she just went, I'll have that, and okay, I've lost my beanie for the day. There we go.
You became a pub landlord that day?
I became a pub, the green room for that shoot was in the pub at the museum, which was wonderful. So I got to stand behind the bar and serve drinks to Colin and Nicola and the rest of the crew.
That sounds like your dream
scenario. Oh my god, it was up there. It was up there.
But all the punters are Doctor Who actors?
Yeah. Maybe we should just run a pub.
You
can only come in if we can see your CV and we see Doctor Who on there.
It's a sitcom waiting to happen. It had a roaring fireplace, didn't it, as well?
Oh, it was beautiful.
It was the perfect
and they set it up going for us while we were off shooting, and we came back and went, we've lit a fire, oh my god, it's perfect. And everyone was very, very
Every green room should be a pub. If
I think
like an old traditional pub as a green room.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Here we go. Well, thank you very much. And
thank you guys. Thank you
more
for
than
having
welcome,
me on.
Chris. It's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
What are we doing next?
Next, we're going to be talking about, actually very fittingly, Attack of the Cybermen.
Yeah.
Which I'm tremendously excited for, which we watched the other day.
We watched it with Banksy, who is
we
my
watched
Cyberman.
Who may or may not.
Yeah, I have a cyber leader, a full-size.
Oh, not actual David Banks?
No, sadly not. Not suspended in a cabinet.
He's been named by one of our patrons. He said, "Why don't you name him Banksy?"
Oh, that's good.
I was like,
it's
of course, it's David Banks. It's the Bristol connection. So
excellent.
Yes. So yeah,
Destroy.
Join us next time. Maybe come in for that just to do the voiceover. We'll be back for Attack of the Cybermen. So see you then.
Bye.
Bye.